So, hello, welcome back. Yesterday I did a rambling of about 20 minutes why I think and what I think Sony is doing on the software front. Because it was such a long video, my guess is that most people won't pick up on two of the arguments that I'm try to make. So let me pick two of them out, one in this video, and just say it out loud. And if you want to see more why I think this is going to be true, watch the other video. So the claim I'm going to make, based on that we see that Sony is reusing a lot of the parts, that the internals for the A7R3 and the A7 III and the A6400 and the A9 are quite similar. And what I mean with that, the CPU part and the LSI part and some of the other parts are being reused. If the flippy screen on the A6400 tells us anything, compared to the rest of the body, is that Sony is really good in reusing parts. I doubted that they have made a new CPU for each of this version, and a new LSI chip for each of these cameras. So what they are doing is they are either, I would not say playing tricks, but playing with how far they can push these chips. They might be underclocking them because the A9 and the A7 III have better, more metal in them, so they can dissipate heat more. Clearly the A7 III and the A6400 have less ways to dissipate heat, so they might be underclocking them. These chips have to do different jobs in different situations. And so it's not clearly cut that even if they have the same hardware that they can do the same thing. Now, as a software engineer, I can make two claims. The first one is, I think, I know that that's kind of being proved with the A9. They either still had a lot of CPU power left, or, and I think that's just as likely, the software engineers have optimized their code. Sometimes that can be a factor of 5 or 10. Don't underestimate what if a software team spends time on what they can do with the hardware already inside, just by improving algorithms and ideas and shortcuts and all kinds of other tricks. You can perform, you can improve the code quite a lot. We see several hints, of course, in the A9. They clearly had enough power to put in the new focusing mode, the animal tracking stuff, but also upping the number of contrast detect points from 25 to 425. People might have missed that, but there's a lot of extra new features in there which require CPU power. Now, partly it might be because Sony was knowing that they would have to react in software to Nikon and to Canon, left some CPU power left, didn't use it in the in the A9, or it's a combination of having a little bit power left and a lot of optimization of now, let's say, more CPU cycles that they can spend. And we are seeing in the two software releases that they announced for the A7 and the two software releases that they announced for the A9, so the 5.0 and the 6.0 version, how they are planned to, let's say, turn them into features to put the A9 on the radar again of a lot of the reviews, because it's kind of fell off the radar, even if it's probably, no, it is the best 24 megapixel camera at the moment, especially with the software updates, and by giving it so much of a bump before they release it before the Olympics, I think, they kind of have to, they probably a lot of sites are going to review it and say, damn, this is actually a very good camera. So I think the same can be said for the A7 III and the A7R3. I think they also left room, maybe different amounts of room, when they released the cameras. So for example, on the A7 III it had to do more because of the 42 megapixels that had to come off, but it could probably clock it a little bit higher because of the same all metal construction. On the A7 III it has less megapixels to worry about, but it has plastic or less metal, so less heat dissipation. So it's unclear how much CPU power was left in these version of the cameras and how much they can regain by just making their code better. Right? So we know that on the A7 III and on the A7R3 we are getting some of the new features. So the eye tracking and the animal tracking and some of the smaller features that don't take much CPU power. But the animal tracking probably already needs quite a lot of CPU power, so that's already a hint they are spending the found CPU cycles. Now, why do I think we are going to get a software version 4.0 with the tracking? Because that's the claim that I'm making here. My claim is that they will release a version 4 for the A7 III and the A7R3, which will have the new tracking mode. So the new tracking mode is the mode where they replace the AF on tracking, which was an old but kind of clunky system that you could do object tracking and it would follow the object. It kind of didn't work most of the time. With this new magical real-time tracking mode, which kind of combined a lot of the features into what we are now seeing in the A6400 and in the A9 being implemented. So I think they are not announcing that at this moment for two reasons. One is they don't want to commit further than 6 months into their development cycle. Why tell everybody about a feature if you don't really have to yet? And also to just not fully show their hands to Canon and Nikon before it's needed. The software team is limited. They don't have unlimited resources, although they can port from version to version. There's no need at the moment to already commit to a 4.0 release which might have these features. They can do it whenever they feel ready, because these cameras are not going to be replaced anytime soon. So I will just read a sort of an end remark here, a quote from Brian Smith, which is one of the Sony ambassadors and probably one of the better connected ones. Together with Patrick Murphy, they were invited first, I think a few days before the meeting, to play around with the firmware and maybe talk a little bit more with Sony about what's coming. And on the end of Brian Smith's blog, which everybody should read, he ends with the following quote: "More firmware updates to come. If your favorite feature request is not included in this list, rest assured that Sony is already working on another round of firmware updates for this summer, and that may well include the features that you have requested." So that's kind of Sony saying, hey, the list that we posted today is not the complete list. So let that sort of sink in. More is coming. And he is so semi-connected to Sony that I'm pretty sure he's saying this with some backing. Sony won't officially say this, but I think my sort of gamble, my stick in the ground, that 4.0 will be coming for the A7R3 and the A7 III, which will have the new tracking mode, is not a guess based on nothing. So I'm putting it out there and see how people react. So see you in the next one. Bye bye.